Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at Ask Conti. My name is Conti Moore Smith. I'm a family law practitioner, practicing family law here in the Central Florida and Orlando area. Today, we have a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about things you must know if you are going through a divorce and you are trying to either sell your home or refinance your home. And today we have two very distinguished guests with us today. We have Janine Alcime, and Janine is the team leader of the Alcime Group, a real estate team with a proven track record of providing excellent service to clients throughout Central Florida. When I asked Janine to send over her bio, she was very modest, and she didn't put in there that she's one of the top selling realtors with Keller Williams here in Central Florida. She doesn't just sell a few homes, she's selling tons of homes here in the Central Florida area, and we're very excited to have her here. Janine and her team believe that generational wealth starts with buying your first home. So thank you and welcome, Janine, and we appreciate you being here to share all of your knowledge and all of your wisdom. We also have with us another very distinguished guest, Jabir Najair. Jabir is the president of Rajon Mortgage, which provides residential mortgages for families throughout the state of Florida. Jabir entered the mortgage industry in 2004 and quickly found tremendous satisfaction in helping families improve their financial position through the use of real estate. Jabir holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from FAMU, Go Rattlers, and an MBA in the international business from Nova Southeastern University. And today he will be discussing your options when you're looking to either purchase or refinance a home. So today we have the dream team here with us. Thank you, Jabir, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Conti.
Oh, Conti, I felt like we should have said go Knights. Nobody mentioned UCF.
Who?
Okay. All right. All right. Well, again, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us and to help individuals understand the process of refinancing a home or purchasing a home or selling a home when you're dealing with divorcing and you don't have two incomes within the same household. So a lot of clients come to me and they are overwhelmed. Right? They're overwhelmed with what's going on with their spouse. They're trying to figure out what the new normal is going to look like. And when I talk to them about, the idea of selling their home, they're like, well, how do we even start? What did we start with? So Janine, if you could talk about, if someone's going to engage you or ask you for your services as far as selling a home that they currently own with their soon to be ex, how do you handle that?
Thank you for having me today, Conti. Well, to answer that question, we get that question a lot from our divorced couples. First and foremost, selling a property in any market is difficult. And when you add the divorce component to that, it makes it even more difficult and complicated. So the first thing I would say is make sure that if the two spouses have an understanding, at least have somewhat of an understanding what you want to do with the property. Once you get to the point where you're consulting an attorney to go through the divorce proceeding, then I definitely highly recommend seeking assistance from a real estate professional that is familiar with divorce real estate and what takes place and how to assist both parties fairly. So to answer that question, I would say once you speak to a divorce attorney, you definitively know that the divorce is going to happen, then you should seek guidance from a real estate professional to determine what should happen to the properties.
And so how do you handle when the parties don't get along? So you represent both the husband and the wife because they're the sellers, right? Have you experienced this?
Yeah. Well, I'm a neutral party. So I go into the situation fully understanding that all parties will not be getting along, because if that was the case, we wouldn't be getting divorced, right? So I make sure they understand that this is not going to be an easy process. It would help everyone involved if we can get along, but I know it's not a perfect world, right? So we communicate to both parties involved. Sometimes it depends, right? Sometimes you need to explain a little bit more to the husband or to the wife, whatever that is. But we try to over communicate to both parties, and we communicate both the same exact information to all parties involved. So we are not taking side. We try to remain as neutral as possible to get you to your desired results. If they're not getting along, that's between them. I'm the neutral party that's coming in to help them achieve the goal of selling their property.
Okay, and so what is your response? I know you say you're a neutral party, and so what is your responsibility or the duties when it comes to selling the home?
Okay, so for me, it's making sure that all parties can agree on a price that is fair and that will cause the property to sell. Right? That's first and foremost. Then we help with the staging, the marketing, and getting the house under contract. Once we do that, we help with the negotiation, making sure both parties understand exactly what's going on with the transaction. Once we do that, our primary goal is to make sure that all parties feel heard. All parties feel as though, where it's a win-win for us. It's not a win-lose. So making sure that we're fair, right? And after that, we serve as just the neutral communicator between like the husband and the wife until the transaction is done, and keep sensitive information confidential, because that's really, really important to individuals getting divorced, and making sure that we cross the finish line despite what's going on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And so do you recommend that people or that one person stay in the home and trying to sell it? Is it easier to sell it if they're both out of the home? Like, what do you see happening and what do you recommend as it relates to living?
So it depends. I've had it both ways, right? Where, whomever was a party that was in the home was very accommodating to showings. All of us shared a common goal, and that was to get the property sold for the most money possible. And then I've had it other ways where the husband wanted to sell the home, the wife didn't, and the wife was living in the home, so she made showing the home impossible. They would say things when other agents and potential buyers come to the home to distract them from even making an offer. So it depends in the situation. We'll make recommendation, but at the end of the day, it's between the husband and the wife. If you have a party that we're all share the same common goal, then yeah, definitely. Sometimes both of them is living in the home, right? And other times it's best for the home to be vacant. So it really depends on the situation.
Right. No, I understand. So have you ever had a situation where one person trashed the house, right, before the closing, or they removed items that are supposed to be a part of the house? Like, have you ever encountered that?
Yes. How do we resolve that? So we had, well, let me just give you a really, really short story. My very first divorce transaction, the wife wouldn't let the refrigerator go. Literally, she was going to cancel the whole transaction over the refrigerator. As we all know, it really wasn't about the refrigerator. I hope they're not watching this live, but anyways. So at the end of the day, we had to agree, like, first she had to tell us what the refrigerator meant to her and why she wanted to keep it so bad. And we agreed for her to take the refrigerator out of the home. And when she did, she literally trashed the home. So what his attorney did was there was a clause in the contract that if she did that, the estimated repairs would come out of her proceeds. So we try to use that language as often as possible so that all parties are aware if there's some damages, then you're responsible for it. It's not going to be the other party.
And that's another good point. It's also important to, when you're trying to go through the divorce or thinking about divorcing your spouse, that you work with an attorney, because there's things that we can do and language that we can include in the actual marital settlement agreement. Ask the court to include in the final judgment that can protect you in the event that after the fact they trash the house, they don't make their payments on the mortgage. You can have a hold harmless provision where you can go back and sue them, try to recover the money. So there's things that we can do if you're working with the team of individuals who are, handling the refinance or handling the sale to make sure that you're protected. And we'll kind of get more into that. But I want to get both Jabir and Janine's input on this. This has happened to us a few times at the firm where you have a client that either we're working with you throughout the process, or they were trying to handle the sale of a property after the divorce, and the spouse tried to completely change the terms of what they agreed to or what's in the court documents, and said, if I don't, you're here at the closing, if you don't give me an extra $20,000, I'm not signing anything, right? So here you are, you're getting ready to sell a property, and you're at the closing like, if I don't give them what they want, they're not going to execute the documents to sell the home. How have you seen that? Is it just me? Have you guys encountered that? And how do people resolve that? I'll tell you what I tell them, but tell me from your point of view.
So for me, if there's a divorce decree, I go exactly off of divorce decree, right? This is what it says. This is the timeline that we have. I don't touch it. Now, if they try to do it prior to getting the divorce decree, or they didn't go through the divorce proceedings yet. So I've had that happen several times, right? It's never a pretty sight because we're days away from closing. There's so many people that will be impacted if we don't proceed with the closing. Then we have a husband or a wife who usually don't really have any financial responsibilities to the home, saying that, look, I don't have to sign. And if you don't give me a certain amount of money, I won't. So it's a conversation between myself, title company, and the seller to then decide which would be the best course of action to take. Because if the seller don't sell the home, we have a family that's potentially going to be homeless, right? And then we have a husband or a spouse that wants a certain amount of money. And the seller, the spouse in that situation have to make the determination, what will be the best course of action for me to take at that time. We give them the best. I'm not an attorney, so we give them the best advice possible. Typically, it really boils down to how much money they want and can we make it work.
Okay. Jabir, have you ever encountered that or heard about people getting to the table and saying, I'm not doing this unless you do X, Y, Z?
So I haven't had a situation where when it comes to the sale of a home, because I'm not really involved in that side of the business when it comes to the sale of a property. I'm more so on the side whenever somebody's purchasing a property or they're refinancing. But I did have something similar or related to what you just mentioned, where the husband and wife, they were already divorced. They had a divorce decree, and the husband was supposed to pay the wife out of a certain portion of the equity within a certain period of time. And he took so long that the property value went up, and now the wife wanted more money. And luckily for her, he didn't fight it too much, but she really took care of every single part of his life. So even though I was working with a husband to refinance a home, everything from the ID to tax returns to bank statements actually got from the ex-wife. She basically had control of his whole life. So I don't think he really had too much, there wasn't too much he could really do to push back, because she still kind of, I guess in a sense, owned his life. So he happily, or I shouldn't say happily, but he did give her the extra money that she wanted.
And that's important too. So when you're going through a divorce, the value of the property, right? You have to determine in your marital settlement agreement or in the court's final judgment, what date do we use to value the property? What is the value of the property? So like people who were divorced in the past year, the value of the property may not have been as high as it is right now, right? A year later. So it's if you're not working with an attorney to help you clearly define the value of the property as being the date of the divorce or the date of the filing of divorce. I mean, you want to make sure that you're clear on what's the date that we're going to value the property. It's even better to put in there, what do you guys consider the value of the property to be, right? Because it makes it easier when you're going to refinance or to sell to figure out what that person's share is, if you have an actual number as to what the value is, right? Otherwise, you'll get into your experience where, okay, I want more money because now it went up, $100,000. So I want, I'm a tell a lawyer, versus limiting your exposure by agreeing to an actual value at the time of the divorce. Okay.
100%.
So I mean,
yeah, I would agree.
So are there any other any advice you have, Janine, for people who are trying to sell their home? Should they start with you before they file for divorce? Should they start, after? Like, what's a good starting point? When should they reach out to you?
Honestly, I've had people do it both ways. Some people will be like, "Hey, I'm thinking about divorcing. What is my property worth?" Right? For me, I always say consult an attorney first before you get us involved, in all honesty, because there's certain legal terms and ramifications that once we've entered a contract that we can't backpedal from. Right. So if you have an attorney that you hired on your behalf, and you guys definitely know that no matter what happened, we're going to get divorced, then you bring the attorney. Once you file your paperwork, then you consult me. Because sometimes people will talk about getting divorced and they end up not doing it. And that's completely okay. But I would suggest that first and foremost, speak to an attorney, look at all your options before doing anything. Because sometimes bringing me into the picture before an attorney may not be the best option for you.
Right. No, I agree with you on that. You brought up a good point about people trying to figure out the value or what their property will sell for.
Yeah.
Have you ever, I know I've been able to reach out to you like, hey, can you run some comps on this property so we can kind of get a better idea? How accurate is Zillow? How accurate is Realtor.com when it comes to their actual value? Like, can you give us some information regarding that?
So in my opinion, Zillow is give or take plus or minus 14%. Sometimes you just can't really trust the value on Zillow. So when you seek professional help from a local agent, the number one thing we will do is we will do a in-depth market analysis for you. So for me, I go into the neighborhood. Let's see what homes that look just like yours recently sold for. If I can't find comps in your community, then, I'll go out a little bit further. So that's the number one thing I would say. But sometimes in divorce situations, I would recommend that the seller hire a professional appraiser to give them an even better in-depth value of what the property is worth. Because typically, there's no disputing the appraiser's numbers unless they're way off. So that would be my recommendation before they do anything, especially if they can't agree on a price to list the property.
And I've also found that it's helpful when in the past I've reached out to you and, I have a mediation coming up and I want to have an idea of what the property could possibly sell for, but my clients don't want to have to pay for an appraisal. And so we're able to say, based on these comps or this market analysis, this is what you're, possibly looking at. It's helped people kind of come to an agreement when we've done that.
Usually the comps are, it's a really good baseline to go off of, honestly, because we've had a situation where, the property valued at 500, but one of the spouses wanted 650. There is no justification for that, right? Based on the comps in the surrounding area. So that's when I would recommend to, if both parties can't agree, I would recommend to hire an appraiser. If they do agree with the comps and the market supports it, then yes, let's list at that price.
Okay, understood. Well, thank you so much for that. I think that's very helpful information for individuals who are looking to possibly sell a home during a divorce. And if you could share your contact information with everyone.
All right, so I am Janine Alcime on Facebook and Janine Alcime Realtor on IG. Our IG stuff is really fun and educational, so if you're not following us on there, you totally should. And then, Conti, we could probably put my contact information in the link below if someone has any questions. Even though you're not getting divorced and you have some real estate related questions, we'll be more than happy to help you with that.
And spell your last name so everyone can find you on Instagram.
All right, it's ALCIM as in Mary, E.
All right, awesome.
Cool.
All right, so Jabir, we have some questions that we want to ask you as well. In my line of work, people are always trying to figure out what do we do with the marital home, right? One spouse was working primarily during the marriage, the other spouse was not. how do we figure this out? So if you could talk about, if there are two people, right, who were on a mortgage and the home is given to one of the spouses, right? How can the other person remove their name from the mortgage?
Well, the one and only way to remove your name from the mortgage, being the note, the financial obligation, would be to refinance and take the other person's name off. So if you're going through a divorce and you have a divorce decree and the judge awards the property to one person, you can't just go to the bank and say, hey, I'm no longer responsible. They're going to want to make sure that the other person that's actually on the mortgage that will be living in the home can afford the home on their own. So you have to go through the process of refinancing, which is why it's very, very important that if you believe that you're heading towards a divorce and things are getting a little rocky, it's definitely best to reach out to me or a mortgage broker of your choice, but preferably me, of course. So we can actually prepare you to actually finance that property. One of the biggest challenges I run into is people who are self-employed. A lot of times when we're self-employed, we write off anything that we can because we want to pay less to Uncle Sam, right? But when it comes to financing a home, that doesn't always look good. It doesn't look like you could actually afford the property. So if you think you're heading towards a divorce, it's best to speak with me first so we can make sure that you're claiming the right amount of income so you can actually qualify for a mortgage. Now, for anybody self-employed, if they already filed their taxes and they're going through divorce, there are alternative options. We do have non-QM, non-qualified mortgage programs. These are the ones that are not your conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or FHA loans. And they will actually use your bank statement deposits to qualify you for a mortgage. Now, I definitely would prefer to take the route of conventional financing because it's much cheaper and much lower rates. But if you are in a place between a rock and a hard place, you have to get that mortgage in your name. There are alternative programs for you if you're self-employed.
Okay. Now, this happens a lot. Okay. Sometimes people just want to be done. They don't want to wait to see if the other person can refinance. They just want, peace of mind. They want to get to the end of the finish line, right? And so they agree to the decree, or they agree to the settlement agreement, and we get the final judgment. And then they give the spouse 90 days to refinance. And then guess what happens? Within 90 days, the other spouse either didn't try to refinance or they don't qualify to refinance. So could you explain what happens to that person's name who's selling the house? What happens to their credit since the other spouse cannot refinance and get them off of it?
So you are actually financially responsible because your name is on that mortgage. There may be some ways that you can actually fight it afterwards, maybe if once a property is finally out of your name. But initially, it is actually your responsibility to get your name off there one way or the other. So the other option would be, of course, maybe to reach out to Janine, because the other person cannot get their name off cannot qualify for a mortgage. Maybe it's now time to actually look at selling the home and renegotiate everything when it comes to that property. But speaking of credit, another thing I would definitely suggest, because I have seen it happen, because I know we're speaking about a home right now, but this may be the time to maybe close off all other credit cards. I have seen where people have shared credit cards and the other person is running up a credit card, or they may actually be an authorized user on a credit card and your name is attached to it. Sometimes it's a credit card that's in the other spouse's name and you just totally forgot about it because the other spouse takes care of that credit card. So now would be the time to actually look at closing those accounts. Maybe if you have shared checking accounts or any type of account, whether it's savings, investments, maybe time to, well, maybe you can't start separating investments yet, but when it comes to accounts, start to separate your money so you can actually take care of your obligations while that person can take care of their obligations. But when it comes to the house, if they cannot qualify, yeah, maybe time to look things over and speak to somebody about selling the home.
Right. So one thing that I see a lot is that you have one spouse like, oh, they can keep the house. Let the other spouse, keep the house. My kids are there, they can keep it. And so then, right, a few years later, they decide they want to get, remarried or buy a house with somebody else. And they can't qualify because that other house is still showing up on their credit report. Have you ever experienced that, Jabir? Or do you have any information you want to share with our viewers about how to avoid that?
Yes, actually, I have experienced that. And the good thing is that if in the settlement agreement, the other person is financially responsible for the home, in underwriting, we can actually omit that whole mortgage from the property, from your debt, your monthly liabilities. But it's very, very important to understand that if that other person is making late payments, we just can't say, oh, that other person was responsible, so that's why it's affecting my credit score. So yes, it's best to actually get the home out of your name altogether if possible. But if the settlement agreement shows that it actually is the other party's responsibility, once we have that settlement agreement, in underwriting, we'll totally admit that whole obligation out of your DTI, so it no longer counts against you.
That's something new that I learned today about the DTI, that if the language is in there that says the other person is responsible, that you guys won't count that to a debt to income ratio. In our situation, it was basically where a spouse just quit making the mortgage payments, and it just ruined the other spouse's credit, like ruined it. And and they really didn't have a lot of recourse because they just wanted to let them have the house or whatever else, but they weren't able to really do much but file a motion for contempt to try to make that person pay the mortgage. But at that point, their credit was ruined.
Yeah, when it comes to the credit, there's really not much we could do about it then, because even if we took the debt out of your debt income ratio and we're calculating everything for your monthly liabilities, if the credit got messed up because the other person wasn't making the mortgage payment, we have to go off of the credit report. And the credit report reports late payments, even if for some reason you still have a high credit score. Just having mortgage late payments, which is when you're dealing with a mortgage, is totally different than having a credit card late payment or car late payment. The lenders definitely don't want to see mortgage late payments, no matter how high your credit score is. So if that person's not making mortgage payments, it could definitely affect you in purchasing a new home. Or if you've actually moved on and you've purchased a new home and you're looking to refinance that home, we still look at that as a late payment on your credit report, even though you're not financially responsible for it.
Well, that's good information. Good to know. Now, have you ever experienced where someone, wants to sell the home, but the other person's like, no, I want to raise our kids here. I don't want to leave the house, but they can't really afford the house. Like, how do you coach people or help people with that who are experiencing that situation with the other spouse?
So you really get into where we have to break down the numbers. And sometimes people get so emotionally attached to the home, whether they're together and want to raise their kids there, or somebody's getting a divorce and they say, you know what, I raised my kids here. The spouse moved on or the ex-spouse moved on, but they really want to keep that home. And that's where you really have to have a sit down, a talk with them and see what the house is really going to cost them. Because sometimes they're not totally used to taking care of all the responsibilities of a home. Yes, we look at the mortgage and say, okay, I could afford that mortgage payment, but then they can't afford the lawn maintenance. They can't afford whenever the AC goes down. And then you start to find that the house starts to fall behind and they have a lot of deferred maintenance. And I'm pretty sure Janine probably have run into that where people have a lot of deferred maintenance, and now it becomes hard for them to sell the home because the new person coming in to purchase a home is going to undercut what the value of the home should be because so much work has to be done. So definitely have seen a lot of times when it comes to financing that people try to stretch it out and they can't afford it. Because many times, you look online, they have these debt income ratio limits. And for anybody that is watching, not familiar with debt income ratio, that's the amount of your income that goes towards paying the liabilities on your credit report, credit cards, car payments, student loans, mortgage. And sometimes we can actually approve you for a lot higher than what you find online, because the programs allow you to qualify for a little bit more. But you really have to look at, okay, now you have responsibility, you have full custody of the kids. Will the child support help pay for the total expenses needed? And maybe you have to actually downgrade downsize rather, not downgrade, downsize it to a smaller home that's a little bit more affordable for you.
Yeah. And Conti, just to add to that, the decision to buy or sell a home is partly emotional and partly financial. And our job in the whole transaction is just to make sure both parties arrive to, can we really afford it? What's holding us back from, getting rid of this liability getting rid of this property that I really can't financially afford, but I have so much emotions tied to this property, I don't want to get rid of it. And that's when someone like Jabir comes in and say, okay, here's the reality. Our job is to provide the reality. Yes, we understand the emotion side of it, but does the financial part make sense? And I think that's where Jabir comes in.
All right. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I actually just thought about it because sometimes we can actually see it. And I remember many years ago, I had a client that came to me twice to refinance, and the third time she came, I was like, "Oh, you really can't afford this house because she's trying to pull cash out, but she's actually using the cash to help supplement, the mortgage payment, her income to make the payments." And I suggested that she sell the home, and I could put in contact with an agent, but she decided that she wanted to keep the home, and she actually went to another broker. So that broker refinanced her because I know she could get a mortgage, but I knew that she couldn't afford it. But somebody's gonna look at it and say, hey, it's a loan. And definitely maybe a year and a half later, she came to me and she's like, is there anything I could do for her? And the only thing I could really offer to her was a realtor to sell the home because she was heading towards foreclosure at that point. So, just to piggyback on what Janine said, sometimes
You went out.
Oh, yeah, we lost you. We lost you.
Here we lost you.
Right. Someone made a comment. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul, and that's actually really that's true. And we see that happening a lot right now. People want to maintain the same house for their kids' benefit. They don't want their kids to feel like they're losing their room or what they're used to, and so they will go to the extreme to try to keep the kids in the same place when it's not really financially in their best interest. And one of the things that I see happening a lot is that people just simply go broke trying to keep a home when they were barely able to afford it, when they had two people in the household and they're trying to do whatever they can to keep it. And the stress that your kids experience is not always the best, and sometimes it's better just to let go of that property and to start and to get something that you can afford. Yeah. Jabir, are we able to hear you again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So let's talk about refinancing and trying to buy out your other spouse. Can you please talk to us about that process? Sometimes what happens in a divorce is that in Florida, we're an equitable distribution state. And so what that means is that we take all of your assets and all of your debts and we kind of put them in a bucket and we distribute them equitably. It's different than a community property state. A community property state, they split your assets and your debts 50-50. Everything's 50-50. Here, we're equitable distributions, the totality of your assets and your debts, and we split them up to make sure that they're distributed equitably, okay? So what will happen is that there's right now, people have a lot of equity. Most people have some equity in their home. And so if one person is going to keep more of another asset, they might say, well, hey, I will buy you out with the money when we refinance the property, right? So if you could talk to us about refinancing and pulling out money and how that works.
Yeah, so when it comes to refinancing, the process can be actually really quick because, especially if there's equity in the property, the first thing that we'll need, of course, is the settlement agreement, so we know how much you're supposed to refinance to take out of the home. So sometimes when we get it, it may already have a dollar amount that the other spouse is supposed to get. So when we refinance, we make sure we pull that amount out. Sometimes it may request that they get a certain percentage, which of course we need to have an appraisal done so we can actually pull that cash out. So the main thing to keep in mind is that whenever we refinance, we cannot pull out 100% of the equity. Depending on the program, is 80 to 85%. So we're gonna have to leave a little bit of equity in there. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges when it comes, because say that you're already at a 90%, let's say, loan to value, where you currently owe 90% of the value of the home, there's really no equity for us to pull out because the programs won't allow you to pull that much equity out, like maybe many years ago. They're just looking to protect the homeowner so they don't end up in a situation like we had many years ago. So if there's equity in the property, I would have to collect all information, just like how you gave to your mortgage book when you purchased the property. And we have to make sure you can qualify for that new loan. So we collect the basic documentation, send it to underwriter. At the same time, we're actually sending out for an appraisal. And we're looking at whatever that dollar amount that you're looking to pull out the home, we're looking to make sure we have that equity in the home so we can actually pull it out. The process, once the appraisal comes in, it gives us a pretty much clean path to how long it's going to take us to close. After we close, and if it's a primary residence, then after closing 3 days later, you would have the funds wired to your account, if not a check, but in most cases it's wired from the title company. And in this case, in a settlement agreement, if it's supposed to go directly to the spouse, ex-spouse, then it'll be wired to her account from the title company.
Okay.
Now, whenever you refinance, if you can also take cash out, which I've actually had, where somebody had to pay their ex-spouse out after a divorce, but they wanted money for their pocket, then you can also take cash out. So if you know that, okay, now, not that you should use the cash out to help supplement your income to pay bills, but if you know there's certain things you have to take care of, whether it's furniture or some repairs to the house, now the other person's out, yes, you can actually take cash out to take care of those expenses as well too.
Okay. You said, how long does it take to usually do this? Like, say from start to finish, if you have a client that gives you all their information, all their documents, about how long is the refinancing process?
About 3 to 4 weeks. There are times where it could be done quicker, right, in a faster manner, but every once in a while we get appraisal waivers, which makes things a lot faster, where we don't actually have to get an appraisal, even if you're taking cash out. But I would say 3 to 4 weeks, you should look to start the process and end the process.
Okay. And Jabir, can you please share your contact information with all the viewers?
Yes, I'm Jabir Najjar with Rajon Mortgage. You can contact me by email at Jabir, Jabir, at Rajon, RIAJAN.com. Or you can contact me at 305-680-5400. Even though a lot of people actually end up contacting me on my cell, so I don't mind, which is 321-239-5814. Also, I have a lot of.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just also have a lot of great information, tips that may actually help people, just like we're discussing today on social media. So you could also follow me at Jabir, Jabir _ Najjar, Najair.
All right, perfect. And I have a couple of more questions, right? So, Janine, if I have a client that wants to sell a house, can you just talk about the market right now and what that looks like in the time that it may take for someone to sell a house in today's market?
So as you guys know, this market is something we haven't seen ever, right? So in this market, if you price it right, if you price it right, it'll take us about 30 to 45 days to sell it. If it's a cash offer, within 2 weeks. So when I go into our listing appointment, I kind of try to understand the situation, where they're coming from, how soon they want to accomplish the goal of to sell their home. And based on that, we'll kind of come up with a plan on how to execute on the sale of the property. But in this market, if you're getting divorced and you want top dollars for your property, I would say to get it on the market now. Whether or not you like your spouse, come to an agreement and get that money, you know. So that would be my advice. Yeah.
I agree. Any last few words you want to share with us, Jabir? Any tips or comments that you want to share with our viewers and listeners?
Well, one of the biggest things I would say, and I kind of mentioned earlier, is if you're going through a situation, make sure you reach out to, of course, you need to reach out to an attorney, reach out to the mortgage broker, because you want to get these things lined up ahead of time. There's so many times I've seen where somebody has a settlement agreement and they have to get a property out of their name, or even advice outside of a divorce, where you have a deadline to get out of a home, you have to get into a new home, and you wait until the last minute to contact somebody, and now you feel pressured to handle all these things in the course of sometimes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that if you maybe have reached out to a professional ahead of time, they could have notified you and you would have been able to take 3, 4, 5 months to take care of these things. So if you know that you're in a certain situation, definitely reach out to one of us so we can actually put you on a direct path to success in getting into a new home.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely would say, Conti, they need a strong team around them, because I've negotiated for people that had no idea what they were doing. And you really don't want that, in addition to the stress of divorcing your spouse. So you just want to make sure you have a strong team, a team that over communicates to you. And it's a team that's just going to walk you through the whole process. Because, divorce is not easy. No one, we're never fully, we never fully understand the whole process unless you go through it. So we try to be so sympathetic and understanding to all parties involved. That's all you can do when someone, give you the honor to represent them.
No, I agree. I agree. So again, everyone that's watching, please contact Janine, contact Jabir. They are great vendors that we recommend to our clients and provide excellent service. If you ever have any questions about divorce, your divorce or custody issues, you can also contact me, Conti Moore Smith at Conti Moore Law. You can follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're everywhere. And we also put out information and tips for individuals that may need our services. We're here to help you stress less. So make sure that you choose more. Thank you all, Janine. Thank you, Jabir, for joining us. Very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you have any questions, please reach out to Janine and Jabir or myself, and we'll make sure that we guide you to where you need to go, which is to have peace of mind and to know that you did everything properly, that it was handled correctly. So thanks again for joining us. Everybody have a great day. And follow us on Instagram and our social media platforms. And one more time, tell them where they can find you.
On IG, I'm Janine Alsame Realtor, and on Facebook is Janine Alsame. If you guys inbox us or DM us, we'll be, we'll respond very quickly and would love to hear your feedback.
All right, and Jabir.
And I'm Jabir Najir, JABIR _Najir, NAJAIR. There's not that many people with my name, so if you just put it in anywhere, I will definitely pop up.
All right.
Well, thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.